Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. U.S. Presidential Envoy Steve Witkoff will lead a delegation to Egypt to join Gaza ceasefire and hostage talks, according to Egyptian Foreign Minister Badel Abdelati, as Qatar's Prime Minister and Turkish delegates will also participate in the third day of negotiations on the indirect talks between Hamas and Israeli representatives. Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg has claimed that she was kidnapped and tortured by Israeli forces after being detained with 478 others from the global Samud flotilla, which attempted to deliver aid to Gaza, according to statements made at a press conference. Meanwhile, according to UN reports, Israeli shelling in Gaza continues despite US calls for a pause during ongoing ceasefire negotiations in Qatar. Russian President Vladimir Putin has claimed on his 73rd birthday that Russian forces have captured nearly 5,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory in 2025, while a top Russian commander has said that troops are advancing in all directions. However, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has dismissed the claims and pointed to gains in Donetsk instead. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of using oil tankers from its shadow fleet for reconnaissance, sabotage and destabilization on operations in Europe, including launching drones from these vessels. Zelensky has also said that Ukraine is sharing intelligence with international partners and called for a strong response on Russia. By orders under President Donald Trump, 200 Texas National Guard troops have now arrived in Illinois for a 60-day deployment to Chicago, sparking outrage from Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker. The deployment has been legally challenged by Illinois officials, with a federal judge set to hold a full hearing on Thursday. Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa has survived an apparent gun and stone attack on his motorcade while opening a water treatment plant in central Ecuador, as reported by his environmental minister Inés Manzano, who has confirmed bullet marks on his vehicle. The assault involved a crowd of around 500 protesters amid escalating unrest over diesel price hikes. 2 bodies have been recovered and 2 people remain missing after a 6-story building under construction collapsed near Plaza Mayor in central Madrid, Spain, according to Spanish authorities. Officials, including Madrid Mayor José Luis Martínez Almeida, has confirmed the incident, which has caused multiple floors to fall into the basement. All 580 trackers and over 300 local guides, yak herders, and support staff stranded in Tibet's Karma Valley near the east face of Everest have been safely evacuated after a massive rescue operation. The trackers were trapped by a powerful blizzard that dumped heavy snow at altitude around 4,200 meters, disrupting their expeditions. Now we start with protesters worldwide. Now thousands of demonstrators took to the streets across 4 countries on the 2nd anniversary of the October 7 attack 2023 on Israel. In Buenos Aires, Argentina, pro-Palestinian activists called for an end to Israeli military action in Gaza and stronger international support for Palestinians. Students in London marched despite Prime Minister Keir Starmer's comments labeling such protests un-British, with participants saying standing for humanity defies true British values. Let's listen in to protesters from Argentina and London.
Mundo, no los pueblos, los gobiernos del mundo se pronuncien con fuerza y que rompan relaciones. Nosotros tenemos la desgracia acá de Milei, que es amigo de ellos, que se saca fotos con Netanyahu y con Trump y está orgulloso de ser parte del genocidio mundial. Por eso estamos acá y es importante estar en la calle hoy.
I was born here. I have a British passport. My mother was born here. I feel like to be British is to stand for British values, and one of those British values should be empathy, and I think it is empathy. It's about being human, and that's what we all are. So I feel like being here is what makes us all British, and I think that's where the Prime Minister is wrong.
Meanwhile, in Mexico City, rallies demanded the government cut ties with Israel, while activists warned against the continuing genocide in Gaza. Similarly, in Bogota, Colombia, protesters marched from the U.S. Embassy to Bolivar Square, burning flags and displaying cardboard cutouts of President Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, calling for immediate global action to end the war. Let's listen in to protesters from Mexico and City of Colombia.
Hoy son los niños de Colombia, de Palestina, y no podemos permitir más estas guerras. Tenemos que sensibilizar a todos los territorios de todo el mundo para que esto no siga pasando. No podemos permitir que los niños se mueran de hambre, de que las familias se mueran de hambre, que los maten de esa manera. Es hora de que las embajadas y los gobiernos se pongan las manos ya en el corazón y actúen de manera inmediata sobre el genocidio y paren esta guerra.
Yo diría que cada día ha sido un día desgarrador para el pueblo de Gaza. Cada día se ha visto más y más muertes, más y más niños asesinados. Yo creo que nunca fue el objetivo del gobierno israelí tener paz, sino un dominio y exterminio total de la población de Gaza. Y sí, cada día estamos más cerca a eso. Y creo que cualquiera que hoy no se para y dice fin a este genocidio, tendrá que cargar ese peso el resto de su vida.
These protests come as Hamas signals willingness to negotiate a ceasefire based on President Trump's plan, while Qatari and U.S. mediators travel to Egypt for indirect talks with Israel. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Gilbert Dr. Rowe. He's an international relations and Russian affairs expert, joins us live from Brussels. Thank you very much, Gilbert, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at Gaza, thousands of demonstrators took to the streets across 4 countries on the second anniversary of the October 7, 2023 attack on Israel. In Buenos Aires, Argentina, pro-Palestinian activists called for an end to Israeli military action in Gaza and stronger international support for Palestinians. Students in London marched despite Prime Minister Keir Starmer's comments labeling such protests un-British, with participants saying standing for humanity defies the true British values. Thousands of demonstrators took to the streets across 4 countries on the second anniversary of the October 7 attack on Israel. In Buenos Aires, Argentina, pro-Palestinian activists called for an end to Israeli military action in Gaza and stronger international support for Palestinians. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Daniela Bloom. She's a political commentator, joins us live from Los Angeles. Thank you very much, Daniela, for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Daniela, as it was second year anniversary from the tragic Hamas attack on Israel, it seems like the protests, pro-Palestinian protests continued regardless around the world. What more can you tell us about the resilience and the message that these protests are trying to put forward?
Yeah, it's just crazy that on October 7th, the most brutal day of the Jewish people since the Holocaust, where 1,200 innocent civilians were slaughtered in their homes and at a concert, we don't even have that day to grieve and remember them and to fight for the hostages home without pro-Pallies taking to our college campuses and our streets, making it about them. And what I find very curious is that if this is truly about a genocide, how come these same pro-Pallies are not taking to the streets and demanding Hamas return the hostages and settle to end this so-called genocide? And there is pressure around the world. There is pressure from Egypt and Qatar. There's Arab brothers and sisters who are telling Hamas enough, and they are still not giving in. So who really wants peace here?
Yes, and Daniela, where you are in Los Angeles, did you see these protests, or did you also see the counter protests of pro-Israel protests calling for everybody to come back home, and the hostages, I mean?
I thank you for asking. I actually took first-hand account in that today. I went to my local university, Cal State Northridge, because there were Jewish students who were setting up a remembrance for October 7th. They were there first. They were there in peace. They were there with American flags. They were there with their microphones. But unfortunately, a pro-Pali protest scheduled right after ours was, because there was a much larger crowd and they were a lot more rowdy, the police decided that to not trigger these pro-Pali protesters, that the Jews would not be allowed to use their microphones. The Jews would not be allowed to come together. They would have to be dispersed. And this is the message we're seeing in England and in Europe. Why is it that the loudest, most rowdiest bunch of people who do not believe in law and order, who don't hold patriotism to said country, are allowed to have the loudest voice? We need to check this and change it.
Thank you, Daniela, for sharing that insight all the way from LA and giving that insight. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. Qatar's Prime Minister and a Turkish delegation are set to join the third day of Gaza peace talks in Egypt. The negotiations held in Sharm el-Sheikh are based on a 20-point plan put forward by U.S. President Donald Trump. Egypt Foreign Ministry has confirmed that President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff will be a part of peace talks. Let's listen in.
بالتالي انخراط الجانب الأمريكي وانخراط الرئيس ترامب نفسه في فرض، حتى لو تطلب الأمر فرض هذه الرؤية، هو أمر مهم جدا ويمثل الضمان للتحرك وإنهاء هذه الحرب. كل تحرك لإنهاء هذه الحرب وحل هذه القضية على أساس تجسيد الدولة الفلسطينية، هذا هو سيؤشر إلى مرحلة جديدة في المنطقة ولشعوب المنطقة ولدمج إسرائيل بشكل كامل في المنطقة وللتطبيع مع أكثر من 57 دولة عربية وإسلامية مستعدة للدخول في علاقات سلام كاملة مع إسرائيل إذا تم التوصل إلى حل لهذه القضية.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has said that the United States would do everything possible to ensure all parties adhere to any agreement. Let's listen in.
And I think there's a possibility that we could have peace in the Middle East. It's something even beyond the Gaza situation. We want a release of the hostages immediately, etc. And so our team is over there now. Another team just left, and other countries, literally every country in the world has supported the plan.
Yep.
I don't think there's anybody that hasn't, actually, not that I've seen. But there's a real...
Hamas is demanding the release of all high-profile Palestinian leader Marwan Barghouti from an Israeli prison. His name has been raised as part of negotiations on a hostage prisoner exchange, which remains a crucial element in the talks. Now for this discussion, we go back to Daniela Bloom. She's a political commentator, joins us live from Los Angeles. Thank you very much, Daniela, for staying with us. From what we know, or what you know, are people hopeful in Israel for the negotiations to bring the hostages back?
We are hopeful, but we also know that the people of Israel, that Hamas plays games. And Israel has already agreed to release 250 Palestinians with life sentences. They've already agreed to release 1,700 Gazans who were directly involved with the attacks on October 7th. Israel is constantly making concessions. It is very clear that they want their hostages back, including the ones who have passed away. They have sacrificed over 1,000 IDF soldiers trying to get them home. Israel has always been ready to end this war, but it's Hamas who continues to stall it. And you know what? Can you blame them? Because they keep getting rewarded by de facto states, by countries all over Europe and the world. And this was never about a two-state solution. Hamas, if they had a chance to do it again on October 7th, they would. And the world needs to wake up and see very clearly who shares their values and who doesn't.
And Daniela, of about the 20 points in the plan that have been put forward by U.S. President Donald Trump, what are the sticking points now? What have been agreed? If you could tell us from what you know.
Just like you stated, they want additional prisoners released. They still want some sort of control in Gaza, which is going to be unacceptable. It is very important after the 2 years of fighting that the last thing Israel would ever accept is that Hamas continues to have any influence in Gaza. They've already shown that they cannot govern themselves. When Israel withdrew in 2005, they left it to the Gazans to vote for their leadership, and they voted Hamas in. Hamas is a terrorist organization that has not had free elections since 2005. So even the Palestinians who are anti-Hamas, they still don't have a voice. Hopefully with Hamas out of the way, those Palestinians who do believe in coexistence will have a voice and will really elect leadership that can come to the table in peace.
Thank you, Daniela, for staying with us and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we stay on the region. Iran has dismissed warnings from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over its missile program and has described them as fabricated and imaginary threats. The Israeli Prime Minister has made these claims during a recent interview with U.S. podcaster Ben Shapiro, alleging that Iran is developing intercontinental ballistic missiles with an 8,000-kilometer range. He has further added that these missiles are capable of reaching U.S. cities, including New York, Washington, Boston, and Miami. Responding to the claims via a social media post on X, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has stated that Israel is attempting to portray Iran's defensive capabilities as a threat. Meanwhile, Iran possesses a substantial arsenal of domestically produced ballistic missiles, including Shahab-3 rockets with a range of 2,000 kilometers, sufficient to reach Israel. These developments in the backdrop of June conflict between the two countries, which lasted 12 days this year following Israeli strikes on Iranian military, political, and nuclear-related sites. Iran, too, had responded with missile and drone attacks on Israel and on the largest U.S. base in the Middle East, located in Qatar. Since the ceasefire on June 24th, Iranian officials have warned of possible renewed conflict while maintaining they do not seek war. Now for this discussion, we go back to our guest, Daniela Bloom. She's a political commentator, joins us live from Los Angeles. Thank you very much, Daniela, for staying with us. Now, looking at the capabilities of Israel and Iran, can you tell us what are the capabilities of Israeli missiles and what are the capabilities from what we know of Iranian missiles?
Well, Israel has an exceptional task force and a military that is none other. And there was much strategy and green lit by the U.S. administration, what they were able to achieve in 12 days. I don't think we will know publicly just how many years Iran has been set back in that 12-day successful operation, but it has been significant. But we also know that the Arab leaders need to puff out their chests and say whatever they need to say to their people to save face. But I trust President Trump, and I think it was a successful operation, and we need to take the hostages home now and de-radicalize Gaza.
And looking back at this news of Iran and Israel, we also know that Iran has dismissed some of Israeli diplomats. What do you think about this news?
I mean, Iran needs to do whatever it needs to do to show this illusion of strength to its extremist followers. I don't really give a lot of credibility to what Iran or the UN says regarding Israel. Israel is surrounded by enemies who want to kill its existence. So, you know, everything is through action, and Israel is still here and will continue to be here. And we are so grateful for the Abraham Accords and other Arab nations like the UAE, even Saudi Arabia, who understands that the best way to peace is through capitalism, and they are changing their tune, and we are very welcoming of that.
All right, we will be eyeing that. Thank you very much, Daniela, for joining us again and staying with us throughout this news. Thank you. Now we move on. Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that deep strikes on Russia in retaliation for Moscow's offensive will not help Ukraine. During his birthday visit to St. Petersburg Church, Putin has met with senior military leaders and later held a meeting with Russia's top commanders. He has noted that Ukrainian forces are retreating across multiple sectors. According to the Russian president, Russian forces have captured almost 5,000 square kilometers in Ukraine this year and have maintained strategic initiative on the battlefield. Moreover, the Russian Defense Ministry has announced the capture of 2 additional villages and stated that Russian troops are advancing in nearly all directions, particularly towards key Donetsk cities. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in his recent video address, has reported that Russia is using oil tankers from its quote-unquote shadow fleet to conduct intelligence gathering and sabotage operations across Europe. The Ukrainian president has further said that he has received a report from his foreign intelligence chief that showed drones fired from Russian tankers and that the information is being shared with international partners. Additionally, Zelensky has called for strong, decisive action against Russia. Now we move on to North America. U.S. President Donald Trump has welcomed Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney to the White House, hailing progress in bilateral trade talks aimed at easing steep U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods. During their meeting, Trump has joked that Canada could be the 51st U.S. state, while Carney laughed and praised Trump as a transformative leader. The discussions focused on lowering tariffs on steel, autos, and other key sectors, with Trump describing potential agreements as comprehensive and mutually beneficial. Both leaders have emphasized the strong relationship between their countries despite natural business conflict. Let's listen in.
We don't like to compete because we sort of hurt each other when we compete. And so we have a natural conflict. It's a natural business conflict, nothing wrong with it. And I think we've come a long way over the last few months, actually, in terms of that relationship. So when it comes to trade, the United States was always giving everything. They gave everything to Canada.
We have had a discussion, the Prime Minister and I, about the importance of having the law enforcement to law enforcement dialogue, which is not just dialogue, cooperation directly. The importance of addressing transnational repression, as I noted, including when we met, and obviously there is a judicial process that's underway, and I need to be careful about further commentary.
Now for this discussion, we're joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at Canada, who has been long ally of U.S., it's very surprising that it's the only country in G7 or last country in G7 to still be negotiating a trade deal with U.S. What are the sticking points here, and what can we expect from their talks?
I think the background of this negotiation is that Canada is the only G7 country which is located in the American continent. So Trump administration's American policy in this case, American continent policy, is a little bit different way in the previous governments. So they focusing more on the American continent. So that's why when he sworn in, President Trump sworn in, Canada should be the 51st state of the United States. And Greenland, Panama, Venezuela, these are mentioned in the statement after that. So that's why in case of the United States, the countries located in the American continent is different with the other part of the world. So in case of Canada, yes, for a long time under the NAFTA, there is a free trade relation between US and Canada. So that's why, of course, the influence is relatively big, but at the same time, the American continent is the policy that is very important. And because of this US-Canada tariff negotiation, and which hasn't concluded, the US and Canada trade is declining indeed drastically. Compared with the last year, compared to before the Trump administration sworn in, or tariff negotiations started, 70% or less than 70% is the common average, the trade between US and Canada now. So that's why this negotiation is not beneficial for view from the trade. But at the same time, because of the new strategy, which is not just economic or trade relation, but also political relation. So that's why this negotiation is needed, the Trump administration think. And so in the near future, it will conclude. But that time, the people will see the Trump administration sees the American continent is part of the Americans' influential area. And before China took some parts, they tried to fortify the Americans' influence in the American continent.
And furthermore, what impact could this potential reduction on U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods have on the economies of both countries?
Temporarily, of course, it has reviewed. I have already mentioned trade itself is shrink to the 70% compared with the past. And, but at the same time, the mood itself has changed because public opinion in Canada, they start to dislike the United States. That is true. But at the same time, after they agree, maybe it could improve later. That could happen, I think. Compared with the beginning of the Trump administration, which is half a year ago, the mood has a little bit moderate. Because in the beginning of this year, the U.S.-Canada relation has deteriorated very drastically, and the emotional resistance from the Canadian side was quite clear. But now there is a mood, they try to negotiate, US and Canada should negotiate to conclude something. That is a mood, so a little bit improved the mood between two countries. Emotional mood has improved, that is a good sign. But still, President Trump mentioned, Canadian side also mentioned, indeed they cannot agree in the near future. Maybe they need to negotiate more. That is the current situation, they said, and it is true, I believe.
Dr. Satoru, can you tell us more about, you've mentioned the mood between U.S. and particularly U.S. and President Trump and Mark Carney. Earlier, President Trump joked about Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state. So how does it look like now?
In this case, it relies on the President Trump's policy in the American continent. It hasn't revealed enough, but in the near future, the American government will publish more clearly, because the United States focusing on the American continent is very clear if we check the recent move of the United States. And recently, of course, 800 general and admiral gathered in Washington, and what is the purpose of this meeting was not clear. And still, the purpose was not clear. But at the same time, gathering high-rank official and meeting in person means that they cannot talk secretly. That is true. And if the United States will publish something, the defense strategy or national security strategy, something like that, such kind of the strategy direction the U.S. government will show. In this case, there's a high possibility that the U.S. will focusing on American continent as a priority because this is the American continent, America's continent, Americans believe. So that's why in this case, Canada is a part of it. So that's why we need to wait the explanation from the United States. Maybe it will happen soon, I believe.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Satoru Nagawa for joining us again and sharing that insight. Now, this is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.